Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boys Jack and Dave here. And in this video, we are going to be asking the question, is ANGEBALL too risky? We're at this moment in time where it feels like fans are starting to lose patience with Ange Postecoglou. Whether that's right or not is probably, not worth really getting into. It's just, we're going to be asking the questions about, are there elements to this style of play that are too risky? Are there maybe some criticisms that are valid towards his style of play? Or there may be some that are probably a bit harsh? So let us know in the comments below. What do you think? Is Ange Balls a bit too risky? Are there some elements to it that you don't like? Or are there some elements to it that you feel like people are being harsh on in general? But Dave, let's get into it. I think one of the main ones that people seem to all of a sudden have a big problem with is his high line. Is Ange Ball too high of a high line? If you get my question.
Yeah, look, when it comes to Highline for me, I think there's a lot of nonsense around the Highline. Personally, I think when you look at a lot of modern day football in general, a lot of them do use the halfway line or just below the halfway line as an actual base to sort of establish their system and try and, what's the right word? Stamp their inferiority on the game, And ideally, the whole reason behind the high line is so that you're closer to the opposition half. So when you lose that ball, you're in a position to turn it over quickly rather than retreat and allow them to get on your goal. That's the whole idea behind the high line. And for me, it's something that I've said for quite some time. I don't think the high line is actually the problem. I think it's the lack of character and leadership right across that back line that is the massive problem. Any successful back line that I've ever known to football, or any successful back line that has gone on to win trophies, they all have that one person in there that organises, that's constantly speaking to people, letting them know what the plan is. For example, Isaac's goal the other day was prime example, that winner. When it comes to it, Romero's trying to play the offside trap and the other three are ready to sprint backwards and try and protect him behind. That shows to me right there, no leadership. No one's calling the shots across there. If you did have someone calling the shots, you avoid a goal like that. And for me, that's the biggest problem with the high line.
I think for me, what people have perhaps might have forgotten with some of their criticisms of the high line is that in order to win the ball high up the pitch, in order to create chances in the opposition's half, you do need to have a high line. If you want to try a high press, that comes with a high line. And so there is going to be some risk and reward with that. If you are going to try to win the ball in dangerous areas so that you can be closer to the opposition's goal without having to work your way all the way up the pitch slowly and methodically, you will have to employ a dangerous high line and then also employ a dangerous high press. And I think that is quite basic to a degree in terms of what we've been seeing in football for the last, 10 years, it feels like, kind of since Pep Guardiola, as well as Jurgen Klopp and plenty of other managers, even before them, have started to employ these types of styles. So it's not like it's exactly unique to Ange, this sort of style of play of trying to win the ball high up the pitch. And combining that sort of principle of wanting to win the ball high up, it does come with the fact that a lot of managers now, they seem to prefer to control possession and control the ball in the opposition's half than actually in their own half. It seems like nowadays that mostly, the game is about controlling the ball and possession in terms of the opposition's half instead of in your own half for those sustained periods of times in hopes that you can basically score plenty of goals. And I think that's also something that we've seen from a variety of managers before even Ange Postecoglou has come to this Premier League, and that is combined with the high line. In order to keep a high line, you need to then be able to control the ball and control possession in your opponent's half, and it comes from winning the ball high up the pitch, but also just comes from trying to kind of deliver sort of dangerous attacks and trying to control sort of the game basically in their half. And by doing that, I think you put your opposition under pressure. You kind of leave their defense all out of sorts. You make it very disheartening, kind of unmotivating, against them. You're basically trying to literally dominate them in the game. And you've seen every manager try that, from De Zerbi just recently to Pep Guardiola to Arteta. I think that's even one of Arteta's biggest principles. You can tell is that it always feels like in the first 30 minutes of his teams, they really come out fast and they come out strong and they are looking to win the ball high up. But then once they do that, they're trying to put you under a variety of pressures, from guys making runs, beyond the wingers, with their fullbacks, or, runs into the box, to, shots from outside the box from their midfielders. They are trying to basically overwhelm the opposition. And I think that does come with technically having a high line. So there isn't really that much you can do about, if you want to control the ball in the opposition's half, you basically need to have a high line. What I would say as well is that someone that has been given a lot of praise in recent seasons by Premier League fans has been Unai Emery. And Unai Emery, especially his first season just recently with Aston Villa, he played one of the most ridiculous offside traps I thought that I had seen in a while now. I remember Antonio Conte, his team found it really hard, but Richarlison was just being caught offside, offside, offside with all those balls over the top. And it was because of a very persistent and very stubborn high line of Unai Emery's. And there have been games last season where I'd argue that that high line was actually exposed on a couple of occasions, and they got away with maybe some criticism that they probably should have been given, whereas Ange Postecoglou's high line, for some reason, has been given that criticism. So I do find that a bit unfair that I've seen
Mm.
other managers employ very similar offside trap that's pretty stubborn, that's pretty ridiculous in terms of, what we've seen, over the years. It's gone, almost too far to a degree, some of these offside traps, but it's not like other managers aren't doing it. And I think a good example of one that is doing it on a regular basis, but doesn't seem to go under the same exact criticism would be someone like an Unai Emery.
Mm.
And it's also just something that I think in general, kind of the great tacticians, quote unquote, are doing. They are employing high lines. They are employing, these kind of offside traps from De Zerbi, especially, I've seen his teams, always
Mm.
look to try to catch someone on an offside trap instead of, trying to track back with them. And I just think that's come with kind of the modern game. So if we want to win the ball high up the pitch, technically we have to have a high line. But Dave,
100%.
yeah, go ahead.
It's the trade-off you have to make. And also, just to add to that, some people go mad about the fullbacks, the inverted fullbacks being asked to push, higher up the field and stuff like that. But Pochettino also done that at Tottenham. I remember sitting there at games and you're looking at the fullbacks more or less playing as wingers. Where the difference comes in is Pochettino, you had Wanyama in the team who was a specialist CDM, specialist ball winner, could get in there and maybe cut out these passes or go and hunt the ball. But most importantly, he usually sat back between the two centre-backs when the fullbacks went forward, which effectively gave us a back three. And the two centre-backs would go out and cover the wide areas, for the
Mhm.
for the fullbacks. What we don't have in this whole squad is a specialist CDM, someone like Wanyama, and I think that's where we missed the trick this window. And this is where I feel sorry for Ange Postecoglou to a degree. Yes, Ange Postecoglou knew the remit of the job, that he would have to work with the players that Tottenham brought in here, going forward. But also where I feel sorry for him is the club also know the system that he wants to play. That's why they hired him. And it does require someone like a CDM. People go, he didn't have a Celtic. He had Callum McGregor doing it. He had Rio Hatate doing it at times.
Mhm.
And for me, this is what this system really lacks. Basuma, I get what he's trying to do with him, get him on the ball, help us progress, but he's not a specialist CDM. And one of his biggest weaknesses is he does switch off and he's not alert to danger a lot of times. So that's a lot of the areas where he's pulled out last season. And this is where I don't think the club have helped Ange Postecoglou to be able to execute this effectively by not bringing in that CDM.
And the only thing I can add to it is maybe one little kind of tweak that makes Ange's slightly different to others is his is a real refusal, it feels like, to drop deep, in any situation that even when they are put under the cosh, even when we are
Mm.
put under pressure, his kind of principle is we want to be still the team on top. We want to still be the one that's dominating you. And I'd argue that maybe other managers, like especially Jurgen Klopp, he's known for the gegenpress and he's known for his own version of a high line. But there were plenty of games where you would see Jurgen Klopp team for periods of the game actually drop deep, try to sustain some of the pressure because they just didn't think that it was necessary or
Mm.
maybe, full on to try to, attempt this high line and kind of sustain pressure in the opposition's half. They were willing to concede some real estate, were willing to concede some areas of
Mm.
the pitch to the opposition when they felt like they were put under pressure. But technically, I think
Mm.
that's even unique to a Klopp, whereas a Pep is similar to an Ange, where he refuses basically to
Mm.
have his team drop deep and be put under pressure like that. And so I think that's again, kind of just a give and take nature with Ange's high line. The only thing I would also add is maybe certain players he could have, kind of let maybe be more focused on, like guys like I think Isak in recent,
Yeah. Yeah.
games. He has to take into consideration that there are certain players that can really tear you apart in the counter and on those kind of transitional moments. But that also just comes with playing in the Premier League. You're coming up against the very best players in the world that will, look to try to hit you on the break and will be very devastating at doing that. But I think that Ange Postecoglou slowly has come to that realization that there are top quality players that will
Mm.
hurt you in these transitional moments. And I think we've been doing a better job of it over the years, that he's been in
Mm.
charge. But kind of, Dave, another thing with kind of Ange's high line, or kind of maybe to a degree similar to it, has been maybe the fact that Spurs have been accused of being too reliant on basically outscoring the opposition by like 2, 3 goals. That every single game, Spurs need to basically score around 3 goals if they have any chance of winning. What do you make of that criticism?
I mean, I thought the whole idea of football was winning, scoring goals to win games. You know, even if you play the most defensive system, it's still set up to keep your opposition out and go and score more than your opposition to go and win games. So I don't understand it. That's what football is all about. You don't win games unless you outscore your
Yeah.
opposition. Where I think the problem comes in with this is, yes, 100% it's reliant on outscoring the opposition. But like I said, what system isn't? What manager isn't relying on outscoring the opposition for the right outcome? However, where I think it maybe lets us down a little bit is, and I know people are just going to say, Dave, stop moaning in the comments, but this is the harsh reality of it. We miss Harry Kane. You know, someone to finish off the moves on a regular basis.
Mhm.
And this is where I feel, again, sorry for Postecoglou. The guy that he thought he was coming in here to use was sold, which then meant Tottenham's job was made a lot harder. And when you don't have the right recruitment to come in and you're not bringing in these clinical type of players and you're going for younger players, which we all know take a bit more time to bed in, the results that we're seeing are going to happen when you're not taking your chances. You're not outscoring your opposition. You're not outscoring the opposition. And that's where a lot of the frustration comes in. Like when we bet Everton 4-0 the other day, there was no talk about the Highline, no talk about us not outscoring the opposition. And games like that is where you see the full effect of ANGEBALL. But, you know, we do come up against better teams than Everton. In fact, you know, probably 17, 18 more teams better than Everton. And that's where the struggles come in going forward, is because when you're up against better teams, because we've got such young players, there is them inconsistencies. There is that, you know, lack of clinical nature in the final third. And that's ultimately what I feel is letting Ange Postecoglou down. Don't get me wrong. Some of the signings in them areas are his, and again, not good enough at this level. But there are others that we've made as a club where we should have got ahead of the situation and said, look, Andrew, I know you identified these guys not quite working out. We're going to bring you in some more experience because it requires it. You know, that more clinical player because this system requires it. But the club didn't do that. And
Yeah.
that's where I feel like he's been let down in that regard, Jack.
In terms of us being reliant on trying to score 3 goals, basically to win, I think there are just a variety of ways that you can try to win a match, and none of them are exactly correct. And I think one of these is actually fading out of the game, the one that I kind of grew up watching with an Antonio Conte or Jose Mourinho, and that would be that more conservative, kind of defensive approach to a game, which is basically you trying to sit deep and try to basically make it very hard on the opposition to break you down. And by doing that, you're basically allowing the opposition to basically creep further and further forward so that eventually you can pick your moments to try to hurt them on the counterattack, hurt them in those transitional moments, and basically take whatever chances come your way. The issue with that, though, is that you are basically relying on just a few chances to try to hurt the opposition, and then you're not going to get too many more than that. And then you're going to need really ruthless forwards in order to put away those chances for you. Because if you don't, then you are going to basically be put under the cosh for around 90 minutes of the game. And only so many defenses nowadays, with all the goals that seem to be flying in left and right. And also, technically, the amount of goals in the Premier League just continues to increase on a regular basis. I'd argue that this style of play has kind of become a bit more harder to execute because you are relying on defenders to stay switched on for an entire 90-minute period. And teams nowadays really are looking to try to control the game in your half. And if you are a defensive minded team, good luck with that, because that can be really
Mm,
tiring and really taxing on your players and on your defense to try to basically sustain that level of pressure, and then also still to have the energy to then try to get all the way up the pitch and hurt the opposition on the counter.
mm,
You can then also, which is basically the complete opposite, which is Ange's style of play, you can look to control games by dominating the ball and possession in the opponent's half and look to put them under pressure basically for a large period of the game, force them into mistakes, make them play out from the back, see if you can catch them in bad areas, and then look to try to put them under an onslaught
mm,
of continuous pressure, which will, like I said earlier, technically tend to wear out your opposition over a sustained period of time. And the more that you wear them out, the more that their lines will start to kind of creep, kind of further and further back. The organization will start to lose itself. Some of the players will kind of be a little tired from having to deal with all the pressure that they are under. And the more goals will technically come your way, or even better chances will come your way over a period. But then, like with everything in football, like with everything in life to a degree, there is risk and there is reward. You might try for something a bit more, which is the case of scoring more goals, but that might come with the risk of getting hurt on the counter. Whereas the other style style of play that I just mentioned, the risk is that you're basically putting yourself under a ton of pressure in hopes that not many goals go in, so that maybe you yourself then can maybe take that one or two chances that come your way.
Mm,
I don't really think there's a right or a wrong with that, but I would argue that nowadays it does feel like the majority of the teams nowadays are trying to control the
mm,
opposition in the opposition half, try to control the game there. There
mm,
does lie that in between when I think that there's kind of, maybe they're called the pragmatic managers, kind of the game by game sort of kind of style of play managers. I think Gary O'Neill might be a current example in the Premier League, but the issue with that is then the fans don't really know what your true style of play is. They're not really, able to pinpoint, what you're actually trying to do in every single game. And then that can leave you, I think, a bit too reliant on just results, and, fans probably feeling a bit indifferent to the style of play that you are trying to execute. And nowadays it feels like fans are kind of wanting, like a
mm,
distinct identity. They kind of want you to have a distinct, way of playing, so that they themselves, I guess, can understand it a bit better. And also, probably if you try that sort of Gary O'Neill pragmatic style of play, I wonder if that's also kind of fading out of the game, because that relies on a lot of tactical lessons, a lot of drawing board type of stuff.
mm.
I'm not even too sure if players even can kind of
No.
sustain that for a long period, constantly sitting in kind of the
Mm,
drawing board and in the tactical room, going over all these incremental little things, instead of just being told this is the way we play and this is the way we
mm.
play every single match. And I think there's no correct way to go about it, but let's be fair here. Like, the way that Ange is going about it is not that different to me from a lot of other managers.
It's not that different to a Jurgen Klopp, to a Pep Guardiola, people like that. Even if you want to go to defensive managers, not much difference to a Jose Conte. Look, many people said they wanted a specific style of play. They want to know, and that's exactly what Ange Postecoglou brings. We have an identity. Okay, do we execute as best as we can? No. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, there's a lot of good bases to be able to build off
Mm,
in terms of the high line, in terms of how good we are on the eye going forward. A lot of the times, up till the final third, we're absolutely excellent on the eye with some of our passing moves, very
yeah.
attractive. But it's in the final third where we really let ourselves down. And if we were more clinical up there, we wouldn't even be having this discussion, Jack.
I'd agree with that. Well, everyone, I think Dave and I will leave it there on whether Ange Ball is too risky. Feel free to disagree with us. Feel free to agree with us in the comments below. We'll be able to take your criticism or take your agreement in any way whatsoever, because I don't think it's really, again, any correct answer on it. I think it's just how fans feel about whatever style of play seems to suit them or suits their
Mm.
preferences. If you can for us, smash the like button. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying your international break, and we'll see you next time. Come on, you Spurs, and the big Ange we trust. We never stop.